right, it's 10 o'clock, so we will start our session. Welcome everyone to our session on sound and healing, or healing sound. And today is an exciting topic, and we are very happy to have with us Farid Telheim, who is actually associating with us with LaGrasse Center for quite some time, and we did a lot of studies together and projects in our section of IPK, Integral Paradigm of Knowledge, the Faculties of Consciousness. And his interest is totally dedicated to this topic of the sound. And let me introduce him formally, briefly. Farid Telheim is a human-centered design strategist who has spent the last 20 years helping several Fortune 500 brands with their mission-critical initiatives. After working with the thousands of talented people at various levels within organizations across the globe, he realized that impersonal resonance was overlooked in the human-centered design process. 3 years ago, Farid stepped back from his position as Chief Innovative Officer of Godrej, Mumbai, India, to dive deeper into research around the science of sound. He studied at Svaram Sound Research Institute in Auroville and continues to collaborate with musicians, scientists, doctors, and educators from several countries to develop new modalities of sound as medicine. In addition to continuing to consult corporations, Farid functions as an integrative wellness coach and researcher dedicated to helping leaders achieve new strategies, personally and professionally. So without further ado, Farid, I want you to present your project, and we hope that this project will become a course, and we want to develop the whole course on the sound, hearing, and healing. Please, Farid.
Well, thank you, Vladimir. I want to thank you and Radha and LaGrasse for giving me this platform to share this content. What I'm going to do today is really take it at a very high level. There's so much to know, so much to learn. I learn things every day within this space that I just wanted to give everyone just an example of how sound is being used as a healing modality, where it's being used, some of the new innovations that are coming around, and really to talk about something that seems to be new, but it's extremely old, and it is tremendously vast as a subject matter. I'm going to just take 1 second to set up my share. This. Just give me 1 moment. And my understanding from you, Vladimir, is that maybe the screen was a little bit blurry when I was sharing, so I apologize for that.
Barry, you were also getting a question. If you could speak a little louder, please.
Sure. Is this better?
There is some kind of little bit kind of hissing noise. I do not know where it is coming from. Maybe you are not using the microphone directly, but hissing is a bit heard. I do not know whether it disturbs anyone. I hope not.
It's terribly ironic that a lecture on sound is full of all this extra sound. But hey, we are surrounded by sounds, audible and inaudible, all the time. And so I apologize that some of this stuff is coming digitally. I don't usually present digitally. I usually present in person, and I usually work with clients in person as well, for many reasons, which I'll cover as we move forward. Let's see. Okay. And also, before I get too far into the content, I think I'm going to take a little bit of inspiration from a Bollywood movie that I recently saw where they rolled the credits before the content. Otherwise, we run the risk of getting to the end without me being able to show some gratitude and thank all the people who who've helped me get to this point. So obviously you mentioned Swaram, and at Swaram, the Sound Institute there in Oroville, I learned tremendously and continue to collaborate with people like Aurelio, Mario, Joseph, Varun, Anushka, Stephen, Nanavel, and then in the Tomatis Center, which is also there, and I'll be talking about a little later. There's Mita, and so I've just had a wonderful sound family there. Outside of that, I've worked with composers and music instrument makers, Alan Tower, John St. Clair, some other very notable people in the sound therapy space, like Nestor Kornblum, and I've taken a lot of inspiration from Joshua Leeds, Jonathan Goldman, Greg Braden, and many, many more. Of course, it wouldn't be complete unless I thanked Andy of Andy's Music Room and Jim Pettit of Memphis Drum Shop, who I spend countless hours with when choosing instruments. The reason I do that is because I don't really have a formal musicology background, but I do know what resonates with me. And so it takes some time when I'm selecting it. So, thank them for their patience. And then, of course, thank all my family and the divine. So before we jump into this, I think it's only fitting that we just take a moment, and I hope the sound will be all right, to just do a small sonic integration. So let's talk about sound. Let's talk about where this comes from, ancient and future civilizations. There's been a lot of talk about vibrational therapy recently, sound healing, if that's a term that you're more familiar with. This is not at all new. Ancient cultures over the world have always used sound as medicine and as part of their story of creation. We look at Christianity, whether you subscribe to Christianity or not, you've probably heard this term. In the beginning, there was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. We see something very similar in the Vedic scriptures. We talk about Vishnu blowing one of thousands of conch shells to bring into creation the universe. But we also know that the Word was with Brahman and the Word was Brahman. It sounds a little bit familiar. And then in Egypt, we had Ta. So Ta also, I'm being told my sound is not coming. Ta also goes into the heart and brings the world into existence. Whether or not you subscribe to any of those cultural beliefs, maybe you're strictly science, we talk about the Big Bang. Again, the sound is there, beginning with a big explosion. And this example of the Himba tribe, which I really like because it kind of blends creation with medicine. And so in the Himba tribe, the women believe that creation starts not at inception, but when they hear the child's song. They learn that song and then they conceive. And they teach the song to the husband And when the baby's born, they teach the song to the baby. The entire village knows the song, and they continue to sing this song. If the child gets hurt, the song is used as medicine. And the song is sang until they depart, until they die. Another great example of sound as medicine is the Bija mantras. Lam, Vam, Ram, Yam, Ham, Sham, Om. Ancient uses of sound as medicine and continue to be used today to charge the chakras. We also see that there's no secret that there's an emerging movement, well, emerging modern movement into plant-based medicines. And so the Onya tribe sing ikaros that are taught to them from the plants themselves. And that usually comes after 4 years or so of apprenticeship in the jungles, in the rainforests, around the plants. And it's then that they have their songs. Each plant has its own song, and that song is used to dispel negative energy and improve the state of the patient, I guess, participant. And then one I really like, going back to Egypt for a moment, is along the Band of Peace, there is basically an ancient hospital. This hospital was called the House of the Spirit. There was a set of stairs. Someone who had a medical problem would come and they would ascend one of the stairs. They choose whatever step they wanted to be on, and each stair was connected to one of 22 check chambers. They would stand there, lie there, or sit there, depending on what their ailment was, and the doctor or the priest would ascend the pyramid and look down through different ports, sing harmonically, and then there was running water underneath the sound of this water. Now on the inside, and I apologize if this is blurry, you'll see that the stone is carved in such a way that it channels the sound. It brings out the harmonics. And we'll talk about the harmonics in a little bit. What we think of as sound is never a pure tone. There are many different octaves and going into the ultrasonic and infrasonic range, which is where it really gets interesting from a medicine point of view. So let's start talking about how we experience sound. Well, they're natural patterns. All aspects of our natural world are constantly evolving, from the cosmos to our DNA, and there's certain harmony involved. We've talked about Fibonacci theorem or Pythagoras, and it's so interesting that everything that we believe or see or interact with and feel that is rational in the world is all subscribed to irrational numbers. We see this in flowers. We see this in pine cones. We see this in the structures that other creatures, other life forms build, the wasp nest. We see this in the spiral of the horns of animals. In the desert, when the water runs out, there's a fractal pattern that emerges. It all subscribes to this theory. This is exactly the same math that determines the veins within a leaf or the pattern on a giraffe. And most interestingly, it is found in our DNA, the exact same pattern. When there's a thunderstorm, lightning storm, the branching of that lightning uses the same formula as the tree uses to branch off. This is an example of our lung. Our lung, one lung, is exactly the same branch pattern and uses the same math as everything else I've shown you. And other other life forms use the same intelligence. This is a cast of a fire ant hill. And these are the paths and the crevices in which the ants dug into the ground and built their colony.
Barry, we're still getting some requests to speak a little bit louder if you could.
Sure. Let's see. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. We see it in coral, in waves, talked about branches, in the wings of a dragonfly or a butterfly or a bee. They're all the same. We use it in our built environment. We use it in our music, right down to the shape of the instrument, as well as the arrangement of the notes. It can be seen in our atmosphere. It can be seen in the planets, and it is in our cosmos. This leads me to the harmony of spheres, which is also called the music of spheres. It's a philosophical concept that regards proportions in the movements of celestial bodies as music. And I'm going to share a couple examples that I have downloaded from NASA's site of this. I hope you will be able to hear them. Here's the sun. You able to hear that?
Yes, we.
That's in the tone of F. I've stopped it a little prematurely because it goes on, as you could imagine. This is the Earth. This is a symphony of radio waves that are interacting with our atmosphere. I'm not sure if you've ever been to a tropical region where may have heard frogs as it rains, or the frog's mating call. It sounds, or they sound, almost identical to what you just heard there. Jupiter. Jupiter has many sounds, but here's an interesting one. That sounds just like birds in the spring to me. And as I mentioned, it's one of many sounds that have been recorded from Jupiter. All of the planets have this. In fact, there are many planetary tuned instruments, some of which I have and work with, for their tremendous resonance. And obviously, they are they're only natural to work with. We can say that. So, what is sound? Sound is actually silence. They're just patterns of longitudinal waves that excite the molecules in matter. That's the reason say that in a vacuum, we don't hear because there aren't molecules in a total vacuum. There aren't molecules to excite. Now, when you think about how fast sound moves in air, I think it's about 750 miles an hour within our atmosphere. These longitudinal waves are consistently compressing and decompressing, and they are exciting whatever molecules they can come across. This happens a lot faster when sound waves interact with, say, water. It moves 5 times faster and is deeply penetrating. This is very important when you consider that we ourselves are made up of about 70% water. Our brains at about 85% water. So physically, sound is actually silent, but the longitudinal wave passes through the matter, gases, solids, and liquids, exciting those molecules. And how do we perceive sound? Well, we perceive sound in a couple different ways. We perceive it vibroacoustically, which is through our cells, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And we perceive it through our ears. In fact, our ears are developed at 18 weeks. So of the 5 physical senses, touch and sound are the first 2 to come in. And obviously, as we talk about the fact that sound is vibration, you need touch in order to perceive sound. According to many healthcare professionals, it's not only the first sense that we have, but it is also the last to go. So you're always encouraged to talk to people if you have the opportunity at the time of their departure. Continue talking to them, even if they're not seemingly conscious. So how does this work? Well, sound enters, these sound waves enter the ear and are transmitted through the auditory canal to the eardrum. The resulting vibrations are moved by 3 ossicles, which are the tiniest bones in the body, into the cochlea. Now, the cochlea has a bundle of about 16,000 hair cells vibrating and turning those into electrical signals, which are sent into the brain. It's interesting that those bundle of hairs actually vibrate the distance of only a single atom, if you can imagine that. So we're quite sensitive in our ability to hear. How sensitive? Well, when we look at other animals in the kingdom, maybe it doesn't seem like we're so sensitive. On average, an adult will hear somewhere between 20 hertz, and a hertz is a cycle per second, or it is the vibration. It just directly corresponds to the wave. So somewhere between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. We are especially adept at hearing human voices. So the faster the wave, the higher the hertz, and the higher the pitch. So you can see that animals like moles or elephants really have much lower tones that we're not able to hear in many cases, and that falls into the infrasound spectrum. And then you have animals like, we all know that dogs can have amazing sense of hearing. They can hear about double what we can hear. But it's really interesting when you get into bats, who obviously use sound to navigate, to eat, to mate, etc., or dolphins, who can generate sounds at 160,000 hertz. That is truly amazing. As I mentioned, these sounds, these tones, they're not single tones. They are bundles of harmonics and overtones. They're composite frequencies that are harmonically related we go right back to that pattern math I was talking about earlier, which is responsible for these harmonic relations. The single tone is a fundamental, and the rest are overtones. All instruments, all voices produce different harmonies and are most audible when they're called with these formants. In our voice, formants are basically they are our physiology, and they have a direct correlation into how we sound or the tone or the color of the sound. They're as unique as fingerprints. So I want to talk about how frequency is sometimes used or is starting to be used in medicine. There is a man named Anthony Holland who has used sound frequency to actually rupture cancer cells. There's a great TED Talk on this, and I think you should, if you're interested in this, you should absolutely see this TED Talk. It lays the foundation. He explains it very well, but basically, he is using the resonant frequencies of a cancer cell, and then increasing the amplitude so that it can no longer stay coherent and it ruptures. Many of you may have seen an opera singer shattering a glass with her voice. She's doing the same thing. She'll flick it, listen to it, hear that note, and then produce that same exact note in perfect pitch, but increasing the amplitude. If you remember from physics, maybe your physics professor showed you footage of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, which collapsed because of the same resonance. The wind started blowing, it started producing a small resonant frequency, the amplitude kept increasing, and then the bridge collapsed, bringing cars bringing cars down with people in them. Nikola Tesla also claimed to have created such a device in New York and used this device. This is about 1 pound, 7 inches by 5 inches, bolted to a building, and it started shaking the building so violently that it may have brought the building down. So rumor has it that they had to smash this machine to stop it. This has been replicated since then, I think, on a show called Mythbusters. While they didn't bring the building down, you could feel the vibrations of this tiny device for several hundred feet away. And again, with enough amplitude, you get a rupture. What's that all about? It's all about vibration. All matter is in a constant state of vibration, even our thoughts. All aspects of the natural world are constantly evolving, from the cosmos to the DNA, which we talked about. So what is this resonance? Well, just talked a little bit about it, but a great example of this is that if you have two tuning forks or anything that are tuned together, you can sound one of them, and if it comes into close enough proximity with the other one will start producing the exact same tone because they have the same fundamental note. This is the same concept of when we meet someone, or we might even just be walking down the street, not even have to meet someone, and instantly know if we like them or don't like them, because we are all emitting these frequencies, our own fundamental resonance, and we may or may not be in harmony with them. So when we are in harmony with them, we get on like no one's business. And when we don't, we are unable to actually see eye to eye. So that's a little bit about resonance. I use tuning forks in a lot of my work, or specially tuned crystals like the bells that I sounded off earlier, really to help bring people into resonance, into their fundamental resonance, to enable homeostasis. Part of it is done through this concept of entrainment. So if I use these tuning forks, I can sound them off near the ears and actually start to entrain their brain waves. So creating neural coherence is when we tune our brain neurons vibrating coherently, and that allows us to feel safe, feel aligned, make better choices. That is when we say we are in the zone. So if you've ever been really engaged in some work, really enjoying it, kind of tune out the world. You are in the zone. Your brain is in complete coherence with your fundamental resonance. Another way this is done is through overtoning or harmonic chanting. Many cultures have done this. You see Nepalese monks or Tibetan monks overtoning. You see a lot of this in Europe, and you're starting to see it in the U.S. This is manipulating your own anatomy and sounding off a single tone. But when you constrict your cavity, you're actually creating, or you are isolating the overtones, the different octaves of the same note. This is not unlike what I showed you in the pyramid in the beginning. Those channels that were carved onto the interior of the pyramid are to enhance the harmonics of the notes being produced within that cavity. And overtoning is the same thing. Now, the interesting thing about when you overtone is that your head is a cavity, and inside that cavity you have the pineal gland. Pineal gland is an amazing gland. It is responsible for producing melatonin. It goes a long way towards our well-being, our sleep, our rest. It is also considered to be the third eye, or the seat of the soul. You'll see this in many ancient paintings. You see this in the Sistine Chapel. You see this in many different artworks. And what it is able to do is produce light through a piezoelectric effect, because recent discovery, there are crystals there. And when those crystals come into contact or vibrate at the right resonance, they actually produce sparks. This has been seen on EEG machines, and you'll hear people say, through deep meditation, they could see flashes of light, and that is why. So move a little bit to the different ways in which we hear. Psychoacoustics is primarily when sound enters the ear. We talked about that. This helps with the nervous system, the heart rate, and breathing. And it's the study of how sound enters the brain, essentially. It also creates physiological responses. Certain sounds, detuned pitches can affect the speed of our brain waves. I've just talked about this. Most of what I've just talked about has been related to psychoacoustics. We can use them to speed up or slow down our heart rate, our brain waves, and some sound engineers control volume and frequency of these stereo pitches in a process called filtering and gating to stimulate active learning and responses in the tiny muscles of the inner ear. One said person is Dr. Alfred Tomatis, and I came in contact with Dr. Tomatis' work while studying in Oroville. And basically, Alfred Tomatis observed the fundamental difference between hearing and listening. Hearing designates passive reception of sound. Yeah, you might have heard this or whatever, and we filter out a lot of stuff. Listening, active listening, is a whole different way of selecting sensory information that makes sense to us. And he invented a device capable of rehabilitating listening through a system of sound called the electronic gating or the electronic ear. What he understood in his studies, and what we understand now based on his studies, is that people will tune out certain frequencies, especially if it's related to trauma or emotional trauma is another one. You hear this a lot when you see a couple who no longer is getting along, and one person says, they don't ever listen to me. And the other person really isn't listening to them because they, through some level of verbal abuse, have blocked out these channels. Now, when we start to shut down too many frequencies, it has a direct implication into our ability to learn and our cognition and our entire state of well-being. So it's quite amazing. I went there and I had one of the listening tests performed. What I was told, amongst other things, I'll just give you a sample of it, is that I hear everything, which is great. It's great for the space I'm in, or I thought. But hearing everything has its own drawbacks. What I was told in the debrief afterwards is that it really related to my upbringing, to certain traumas I had. It was amazing. So Mita, who I thanked earlier and who was on the previous screen, runs a center there. And afterwards, she told me that she told me of traumas that I had, physical and some emotional ones, almost as if looking through a crystal ball. She told me years, stuff I had forgotten, and I really had to think. And then it dawned on me, yes, something did happen. It was quite scary, and I'll tell you, I wouldn't have believed it if you just told me this. But believe me when I tell you that if you visit Oroville, this test is a must. So vibroacoustics. Well, this is the space in which I work the most. This is using the body as the ear. This is using tones that may be inaudible to you in a series of instruments, many of them from swaram, gongs, specially tuned crystals, tuning forks, wind instruments, string instruments. Some of it is well, a lot of it is audible, but it's really the inaudible work that I'm focusing on. Now, Jonathan Goldman is a producer, an instrument maker, and a very notable vibrational therapist or sound worker. Shares a formula that intention plus frequency equals healing. So a lot of it is really being present with the person, delivering a certain amount of empathy, or building empathy, I should say, and actively listening to that person. A lot of the work we do as sound workers is really related to listening just as much as it is to producing sound. And earlier when I said that sound was actually silence, this is another example of when silence really amplifies your sound. So, talked about what that is, the subtle energies, electromagnetic space, you might call it chi, might call it prana, call it the ether, the kasha, spirit, so torsion field, chakras, whatever you want to call it. There is no doubt that we produce electricity. We produce an energetic field, and that field is full of vibration. So what we put out and what we put in, or what we bring in, is directly related to our health. That brings me to the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve runs up and down your spinal column, and it is responsible. It's responsible for your life, basically. Um, it governs all of the essential organs. It governs your heart, your lungs, your digestive process, your ability to sleep, whether or not your emotional state. So a healthy vagus nerve helps us access the part of the brain used for rest and is responsible for complex decision making, creativity, higher cognition, leadership, and decision making. An unhealthy one is very primal and related to survival. It's the fight or flight, and the third piece is freeze. So we often hear about fight or flight. We understand what that means, but the third piece is freeze. So some people may not fight, they may not take flight, they just freeze and they are stuck. And sometimes that is the worst position to be in because you just don't know how to get out of that. This is greatly related to stress, depression, anxiety, hypertension, diabetes, digestive disorders, kidney malfunctions, Parkinson's disease, heart failure, and chronic inflammation. And if you know what chronic inflammation leads to, it leads to cancer. In fact, I don't think I have not seen in my research any cases of cancer not being related to chronic inflammation, or chronic inflammation being a precursor to cancer, I should put it that way. So when we are in balance, and how do we get in balance? Well, one of the things is by focused and conscious breathing. That is one of the main things we can do. So I always start my sessions by speaking to someone, listening, then breathing. Just take some time to breathe. I'm not in a rush. You shouldn't be. Let's slow things down. And then we bring in the instruments. This helps with a stronger immune system, stress reduction, resilience, and emotional flexibility. Other things that help: singing, meditation, yoga, laughing, hugging, proper nutrition and exercise. These all lead to a healthy vagus nerve. A healthy vagus nerve is a healthy you. Now, we talked about vibroacoustics, and why is this possible? Well, recently in 2015, there was a Columbia University researchers found something they called primary cilia, which are microtubes that act as antenna on our cells. They protrude from the surface, and they're like cellular antenna. So we talked about receiving frequencies. Obviously, you need antennas. They're transducing and regulating several signaling pathways, as well as responding to radio frequencies and sound. And this proves that we hear at a cellular level. I say that to people, and without being able to show them the slide, there might be some suspicion to that claim, but it is very true. So how is sound being used in science? Well, if we weren't thinking about these instruments, we just talked about purely scientific devices. 1956, the ultrasound was introduced, and it was the first time. Now we use it to image, damage. We also, so it can be used diagnostically and prescriptively. Now we use to help repair bone fractures or soft tissue damage. And building off of that, we have magnetic resonance guided focused ultrasound. That's a mouthful, but a transducer sends highly focused sound into your body, heats up and liquefies growths like uterine fibroids. This has just been approved in the States in 2004. Yeah, 18 years ago. But when we talk about interventions, this is kind of just approved. Not everyone has it. It takes special training to learn how to use it. There's also infrasonic extracorporeal shock waves that are used to break up gallstones or HIFU, which is high intensity focused ultrasounds. And that's used to interrupt faulty brain circuits, helping in Parkinson's disease. And there is some research showing that it may be very useful in breast and prostate cancers. 86% success rate over 5 years in many of those cases. How does this translate to something like our DNA? Well, Nobel Prize winner Elizabeth Blackburn discovered that on the ends of our DNA, here shown in green, we have something that's called a telomere. They protect the chromosome, which is shown in the purple or the pink. And the longer and healthier they are, the more our DNA can replicate, keeping us basically from aging. It's like a fountain of youth in every cell. Now, what tears that down? It's so simple and so related to the vagus nerve. It's nutrition, bad nutrition, physical or emotional abuse, loss of love, no self-love, no purpose, a feeling of anxiety, and most recently, or most, I don't want to call it popular, is PTSD. PTSD is not just experienced by people in war. It is experienced in inner cities all the time because of the level of violence or strife or just abusive relationships. Now, how do we improve it? Again, happiness and gratitude, self-love, nutrition, exercise, being in service, and being relaxed. So of course, depending on your personal frequency and where you're resonating, that relaxed state is tied directly to your health. From Bruce Lipton, we have this concept of epigenetics and cellular expression. And Bruce goes on to talk about how you can actually change your DNA, really by just changing your mind. So Bruce's research was based on the fact that he was working with stem cells from the same sample. He just put them in different environments. Some of them grew bone, some of them grew muscle, some of them grew fat. All the same stem cells, but subjected to different environments, all express themselves differently. So I won't get into a lot of detail here. I think I'll save that for the courses, but this is a great example of how we can change our DNA. We're talking about shifts at a quantum physics scale. Your consciousness affects your behavior and the subatomic particles. There's no doubt about that. These particles are moving backwards and forwards in time. They reappear, they disappear. It is a fascinating space, but without having to explain it, just understand that how you resonate is how you will express. We all know about the work of Dr. Emoto and the intention that he expressed toward water, and how those water molecules became beautiful or deformed. Well, Hans Jenny work inspired John Stuart Reid. John Stuart Reid built a CymaScope. This is an example of water with a pure tone of sound put into it. That CymaScope is paving the way for a lot of research in medicine. It is a very interesting space for anyone who is in the medical research field and you don't know about it. You can just go to cymascope.com. There is a ton of research. This is what brain waves look like. Beta brain waves. Beta brain waves are happening at somewhere 15 and 40 hertz. This is when the brain is aroused and engaged in mental activities. It generates beta brain waves. So characteristics of that might be an engaged mind, a person in an active conversation, perhaps I'm generating beta brainwaves right now as I present to you. Here's the human spinal signal. This is 50 to 60 hertz. Amazing, amazing imagery, and so much to learn from the resonant frequencies of our biology. These examples of different musical notes on water, and the water naturally produces these beautiful geometric patterns, or this sacred geometry. And this is one of my favorites. If you look closely, you will see that it looks like there are 18 meditators in the middle ring, all sitting in an asana and meditating. This is the Schumann resonance. Schumann resonance is the hertz in which the earth throbs, 7.83 hertz, and this is what that looks like. And then finally here, we get into sonocytology. On the left, you have a healthy cell. On the right, you have a cancer cell. So you can see how each one of them vibrates differently and is expressing themselves. Now, I showed you the work of Anthony Holland. There are many, many other doctors who are now listening to these cells using a sinoscope and sinusocytology, and figuring out what the song of the cell is, and then meeting that cell with another one, with the same sound, and rupturing it. This is beautiful work because it doesn't affect any of the other healthy cells around it. And so maybe cancer is coming to an end. Here's one creature that doesn't have cancer. In fact, they don't experience cancer. They can turn their diabetes on and off, and scientists believe their ability to undergo rapid gene evolution is why. This is all we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes or so. And what's interesting about it is that they produce sound at 160,000 hertz. Cancer is destroyed at between 100,000 and 300,000 hertz. So I don't know if there's also a correlation there, but it seems pretty amazing to me. Here's another example of how sound is being used in medicine. Dr. Emiliano Toso is literally playing a grand piano in an operating room when they're doing an open brain surgery. Amazing. And what was understood is that when they stopped playing or restarted the music, they noticed patients' responses. All of the equipment was measuring the patient's vitals, and there was a clear response. So despite the fact that the patient was under total anesthesia, the brain appeared to perceive music, and it was, and that is really, really exciting. This is maybe last example I'll show. This is vibrational recording. This is Dr. Peter Garlev. Has a tool he's developing. This is Wave Genetics. Wave Genetics. He listens to cells, healthy cells. He programs that sound into a laser and then beams that laser into unhealthy tissue and changes the state of that tissue. So, according to him, he's been able to grow teeth, healthy pancreas, with DNA from healthy matched people, and in one test, he created what is this called? This is he created artificial diabetes in mice. He gave them nearly lethal doses of sugar, and then as their organs were shutting down, he beamed them with these lasers and got a dramatic change in organ function and the health of those organs. So, almost coming to a close. I've shared a lot of topics in a very little time. Sorry if I've grazed over it, but again, we will be developing courses in the next coming months. And if you haven't experienced sound as a healing modality, you may be wondering what all this means. So I'll share just a little story. In November, I was hospitalized and on oxygen with a bunch of hoses and wires attached to me, machines monitoring my vitals. Things were not looking good. I was in the hospital for over a week, and despite medical staff's best technologies and medications, all the tests were conclusive. I was in a state of decline. I reached out to members of my sound community, my sound collaborators, and then received beautiful files back, sound files, harmonic chanting, overtone chanting, sounds of specific instruments with specific resonance, and a good couple of friends from Oroville, Varun and Anushka, created some songs for me. And I remember when I received them, I was kind of laying on my side, just looking at the machine, just kind of watching my vitals. And as I put my earphones in and started listening, something quite miraculous happened. The vitals started improving instantly. And I just kept listening and listening and listening. And the next day I had my tests, and 24 hours after those tests, I was out of the hospital. Everything had reversed. I am not knocking medicine. Medicine was definitely played a part. I have a lot of family members that are doctors who are constantly checking on me, telling me what to ask my doctors. But I'll tell you, when I heard the sound, I instantly felt better, and I could see it right in front of my face as I was being monitored by these machines. So what I would love to do in our closing minutes is I would love to play you the song that they sent me. And before I do that, I'll tell you, when I got home and I was talking to them about this song, I said, hey, Varun, your harmonics, your overtone chanting has improved so greatly. And he laughed and said, those were your overtones. So about a year earlier, I was doing some overtone chanting. I sent them to Varun. He was going to use them in a song. He didn't use them in that song, but he said, I felt that this was the song they needed to be used in. So in some amazing way, it's almost like The Alchemist. I've been searching for proof. And in some way, I played a role in my own proof. So let me just play this for you. As I do it, I would encourage you just to close your eyes, breathe normally, as we talked about sound being vibration and how important breath is. Let the sound come through. Breathe in this vibration. He is chanting the Ayura mantra, which is the mantra for health and wellness. So if you're experiencing anything that is not serving you, I hope that this will be as beneficial to you as it was to me. That's not good. Well, I hate that that is not playing. Just one sec. Let's see what we can do here. Let's see if we can do it a different way. Oh. hear that?
A little louder would be good. So, um, in closing, I'll just share with you where I want to go next with this. As mentioned in the open,
I've worked with lots of organizations really on their biggest business challenges in the last few years, having decided to take some time off. It's pandemic. Why not? Why not spend the time doing something that is beneficial not only to self but to others? I realize that I still have a deep passion to work with corporations, especially in the space of creativity and teamwork. So, what I think, or my point of view on all of this, is that so many people are showing up to work completely depleted, suffering from some level of trauma, whether it's a chronic illness, or it's just stress, or it is whatever it may be. And that leads to the inability to really for teams to perform at their highest. And when I say perform at their highest, I'm not talking about traditional corporate consulting, more out of less. I'm saying showing up in harmony, in resonance with yourself and your team to work on basically creating whatever you need to create in a more harmonious way. Right now, the world is running out of resources. Supply chains are collapsed. You see economies of countries, crumbling every day. We are not in harmony right now. And so I'd like to continue building protocols and take this into companies and work with companies to create the new. And happy people create happy outputs. I want to thank everyone for joining me this morning. I know it's tough Saturday morning, depending on where or Saturday night if you're dialing in from India. But I appreciate it. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Farid, for this wonderful presentation. And there are some questions here at the end. And I wanted to bring maybe Dawn Salman because he has several questions. So I thought maybe it would be better if he would be promoted to panelists and ask them rather than I would read them out.
I will try my best. As I said, I'm on the path of learning as well. So anything that I can't answer, I will definitely take as a question, do some research, and answer. Maybe answer through Lagrange in some capacity. But yes.
Yes, Don, please go ahead, ask your questions.
Farid, first of all, that was wonderful. I've been involved in music therapy and sound healing for 50 years. I think quite a bit longer than you've been around, and you really covered so many territories. And second, I really hope your healing journey, personal one, continues and you flourish and thrive. So I'll try and make it brief. I know we're almost done. You mentioned Tomatis. I think he's the one who went to a monastery and they were asking, the monks were all depressed. They had stopped chanting. He said, just start chanting again. And they became happy.
Yes.
And my question for people in general, let me see, I'll try and make it simple. So I've been talking with friends in the music therapy and healing world for all these years and saying, they've been trying to measure scientifically precise effects. As far as I know, I think with physical conditions it can be done. I don't think it can be done with psychological. So people swear by hemisync or binaural beats, and I've never seen research where it's better than relaxation. But people might be interested in this. Stanislav Grof, a psychiatrist who used psychedelics, and when the US made it illegal, he developed breathing, relaxation, and music, and he recreated LSD effects. But what he did was there were trained people who chose music for that particular person and used it. So I looked up Tomatis' website because I know he's been successful with autism.
Yep.
So he says, yes, we do measure the sounds, we do have recorded language, but it also requires trained, skilled technicians. So I think the answer is, so coming back, let me give you one more. That music you played at the end was so beautiful, and we all love drones. So it's interesting. I'm working on a sleep course where I'm composing drones to help people sleep. Scientifically, why do drones work? When you have, last thing I promise, when you have a continuous perception with nothing your mind can grab onto, your left hemisphere gives up and you immediately shift from beta waves to alpha waves and you get relaxed, okay? And one thing occurred to me just last week, I never thought of it before. You know how Zen monks meditate facing a wall?
Yeah.
I've always thought, oh, that's just kind of remove yourself from the world. But they have their eyes open. And it struck me what they're doing is they're seeing a spaciousness with no definition, and it's shifting their brain waves into alpha and maybe into gamma, the higher state, to enable to create something that facilitates a non-dual awareness or unity, yeah. So that was, anyway, I love your presentation. You brought in you brought all the heavy hitters. I hope you keep healing, and thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. I am familiar a little bit with the Groff technique. I'm not a practitioner, but I've come across it. Amazing work, amazing work. And breathing is the key to it. It's quite involved, and like you said, with Tomatis, you need the right practitioners along with you. The Groff, there are specific practitioners who focus on certain types of trauma to help people heal. I also wanted to say one thing which came to mind, and I forgot to mention it. We talk about sound healers. We are sound workers. I don't necessarily consider myself a healer. I and I don't think anyone else is healing you. You are healing yourself. We are there to accompany you. We are there to take the journey with you and set the tone, like Groff, or like your work, or many of our works. When you talk about HemiSync, and I remember Bill Harris with HoloSync technologies, I think they were based on the Tomatis method as well. Tomatis was amazing, and why I really endorse kind of Aurigo for this is that Tomatis was there and worked with Mita directly and donated the original machine, the original protocols, and they do it in the original way. I won't speak to anything that other Tomatis institutes are doing. I don't know about that, but what is happening in Aurigo is truly remarkable. And Mita will take your mother's voice and blend it with certain sounds, Mozart in some cases, to help you not only overcome that trauma, but can also put in linguistic cues, help you learn Tamil at a supercharged rate. This stuff is amazing. So thank you for your questions and statements.
Lovely, thank you for sharing these. And many people ask about this mantra and would love to have their recording if it is possible. If it is not personal for you, if it is, it can be shared. And by the way, in this mantra, though translation was made very freely and not wrongly, the translation could be a bit different. Establish, dei means put it in place. Establish the life force, establish the sight, the vision, establish the hearing, establish the word, establish the mind, establish the self, establish me in me, establish. And this self-establishment is actually a very true sense of the health, svadha, the same root dha, to establish, so to say. Swastha, the word is staying in oneself, being oneself. This, all the faculties of consciousness, why I was tempted to mention this at the end, were established by the mantra, by the sound intention into the proper kind of positioning in our system. And once they are all properly established and they are not contradictory, not overlapping, not deficiently kind of interfering, then we have the fullness of health and harmony, because all of them can act and in unison. The last one. And on this question, maybe we will stop. What is the difference? I wanted also to ask the same question between the oneness as unison and harmony. Harmony which is not unison, but it's a difference of different kind of vibrations coming together in symphonic oneness. Yeah? So it's not the same kind of vibration which we recognize and we are drawn to. If somebody vibrates in the same vibration, we are drawn to it. Yes, we feel good because you are like me. It's like oneness in a sense of uniformity and oneness in the sense of unity. How could you kind of distinguish these two in terms of sound?
Yeah. Wow, that is a very rich rich question, and I think can be answered in a number of ways. I'm going to answer it kind of in the simplest way in which I experience or understand unison and actually the mechanics of sound. So unison, you have these two perfectly pitched tones, and they're sounded off. I mean, it goes back to that resonance, that sympathetic resonance, where they both start to when you strike one and the other one starts to vibrate. That happens with the, well, they're off to the side with these instruments that I use as well, right? And so I can undo these and arrange them in different ways to create a match set, a match pair to give you unison. Also, as with the tuning forks or anything else, I can bring two tones to you that are slightly out of sync with each other. And if I bring them, close enough to your ears, what happens is your brain will start doing some automatic math. For example, I talked about how we can hear more or less, 20 hertz up to 20,000. Kids, with fresh, bright ears who have not been exposed to a lot of noise pollution can hear down, 16, maybe even less hertz. But the Schumann resonance, something that we don't normally hear, but we experience, and this happens when you take your shoes off and you go out, especially in the country, when you're away from lots of cellular, and when I say cellular, I mean this cellular, interference, and you take your shoes off and you do some grounding, you are absorbing that frequency vibroacoustically. There is a siren right on cue. So that what happens is if I take those two things and I sound them, you wouldn't normally hear a frequency of 7.83 hertz or 8 hertz or whatever, but you can hear something at at 100 hertz, and you can hear something else at 93 hertz, and your mind does the math and it creates a beat, and then you experience that frequency. So now that is not necessarily dissonance. Dissonance is when you have tones that don't naturally pair as well according to the way we've structured music. And we talk about how we've structured music, and this is a course in itself. There are various music systems. We have elemental, tonality, which comes from instruments like gongs. They're pure element. They're not. So you can tune them, but they're not usually used like something like a piano, which has been tuned somewhat arbitrarily and somewhat recently to an A, middle C and A equaling 440 hertz. It's great when you want to compose because everything is kind of equally, or not equally. Everything is set up so that you can calculate with no problem, which is different than how we experience music in the East, which is completely different different way in which tonality we experience tonality, which is why I think that you have a marching band, marching into battle. You're playing on a A440, and you get people excited, and they go. And then when you want to really sit back, relax, get to different states, you might be listening to certain ragas and experiencing those things. Different models of tonality, but let's focus on that A440 for the remainder of this question, which is, we have minor thirds and perfect fifths, wonderful octaves. These are all in harmony. These are all in that perfect harmony. They feel right to us. They sound right to us because of the structures and the math that is prevalent in our natural world and as far out in the cosmos as we can see, or as tiny enough as we can see through a microscope. That math is no different than the math we experience in that music. Now, when you get notes that are too close to each other, not too close to each other, but if I play an F and a G, those don't automatically sound great to most people. They are too close. They create some dissonance. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Dissonance can be used to create different states. So I mentioned, using different notes in different ways, dissonant frequencies and more harmonic frequencies to either slow down or speed up breathing patterns, brain waves, and heart rate. And it's all related to that. And I hope I've answered the question adequately. I've answered it the way I understood it.
Thank you. This is great. I think even that dissonance, seeming dissonant in its proper timing of the event, because the sound is always an event in time. So in that moment of time, it can play a very harmonious and important role. It is only when it is placed in a wrong position in the time event and the sound event, then it will play that disharmonious. Even any proper, quarta or quinta could play the same wrong event if it is in a wrong place in the moment of sound. Let us say in the moment of sound is a good thing. So wonderful presentation. Everybody is excited, and we are looking forward to your course, which will come soon. In few months, we are planning to start the course with Farid, where he will go into all the details of what he was presenting today, and many more things to learn. This would be wonderful.
Journey together.
Yes, that would be a wonderful journey. Thank you, Farid. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Farid. Looking forward to the course.
Namaste.
Namaste.